Good afternoon, my friends. Welcome once more to the time between times. The time of stories. The time when we sit back, we relax, and we let all our cares and our worries vanish into air, into thin air. The time between times. The time when tales are told. The time when tales are imparted. The time when tales are listened to. The time between times. The time when the veil between our world and the fairy world grows wafer, wafer thin. And so thin that for just a few moments you can reach into their world, and for a few moments they can reach into ours. The time between times. The time of stories. The time that people see ghosts. The time that people see lights in the sky. There are many in our number now, and we sit around the fireplace, and we can hear the howl of wolves. We can see and hear bears growling. But we know we are safe right here in the time between times. So sit back, relax, and listen to this tale traditionally told. Another tale from Wales, another tale from South Wales, another tale, this time from the Gower Peninsula, one of the most beautiful parts of Britain. A place, they say, is the landscape of heaven. But there, near Three Cliffs Bay, atop a cliff top overlooking the ocean, stands Pennard Castle. An old ruin covered in sand, a haunted, beguiling ruin that stands there, foreshadowing all that part of Gower. Many years ago, the time when the great invasion came from Normandy, led by William the Conqueror, the Normans came into Wales. The lands in Gower were granted to Henry de Beaumont, one of William's most trusted advisors, who had fought bravely at Hastings. Bravely, but cruelly, for he was a cruel man. Henry de Beaumont, he liked to hunt. Henry de Beaumont, he liked to take all he could from the land around him. And he built a castle in Pennard, stone upon stone, brick upon brick. And there at the top great walls overlooking the ocean you could see for miles around. And every day he and his warriors would go forth and take everything from the locals they had. Take their money, take their food, take their belongings, and bring them into the castle. For he was an overlord and a cruel, cruel man. One night, at the time between times, Henry had returned from a great hunt where he had caught the greatest stag he had ever seen, and the stag was cooking on the fireplace in the great hall in Pennard Castle. Just to clear his head, he decided to walk upon the battlements and ramparts of Pennard and survey all that he owned, for he could see as far out to sea as was possible, and he knew that all the land and all the ocean was his, for the king had granted him it. As he stood upon the walls looking out to sea, for a moment, he thought he saw a dolphin jump from the water, splash underneath. Confused, he looked again and saw that this was no dolphin. No, there in the ocean off the beach near the castle swam the fairest maiden he had ever seen. Her hair was long and black and covered in seaweed. She washed and jumped and frolicked in the sea, and even from this great distance, he could see that this was a maid not of this world. Although there was merriment in the great hall, Henry made his way down the stone steps, across the courtyard, across out of the castle, and he walked down to the beach. And there the maiden carried on, jumping up and down, splashing and swimming. Although he was still wearing his armour, he stepped into the ocean, feeling the cold upon his legs, and called out to her. "Who are you?" She turned and looked at him, and her eyes seemed to pass into his very soul. "I am Owen," she said, in a voice as old as the mountains and as capricious as the sea. Henry was smitten, instantly falling in love with this woman from another world. He looked and could see the sun passing behind the clouds. He could see that night was about to fall. He knew that this was a magical time. He walked out further, and she walked towards him. He reached out with his hand. She reached out to him, I have never seen such beauty as I have seen here tonight, he said to her. Will you marry me? I am Henry de Beaufort. I am Lord of Pennard and all around it. Will you marry me? The lady from the ocean looked at him and said, yes, but you will grant me one request. If you do not, then it is over between us. Of course, I will grant you anything, said de Beaufort. And he grabbed hold of her. And there in the ocean, as the waves lapped around their legs, they kissed under the moonlight. The next day, Owen returned to Pennard and Henry was waiting. He had decked out the great hall in garlands of flowers, and villagers from all around had gathered for this great wedding feast. The maiden walked out of the water. She was wearing a dress made from shells. There was a great gasp at her beauty, for no one had seen anything like this, although everyone was fearful, for this was obviously one of the Tylwyth Teg, or the Very Folk, as they were known in the area. She walked up and into the great hall, where she married Hugh de Beaufort. There. Their oaths were said, but then she turned to him and said, you may notice I have no guests. You may notice my family is not here, but they will arrive tonight at the time between times, the time when it is neither night nor day, but the sun has gone and the sky is grey. Please welcome them. That is my request to you. I will welcome them, said Hugh. But tonight we feast. Tonight all my warriors and my hunters and the people that I know from the land are here for our wedding. Strike up the music, he called. The merriment began. All his Norman lords and warriors and knights started to drink and sing. The villagers now knew it was the time to leave and started to go one after the other. Henry drank more wine, he ate more food, and the noise got louder and louder. The dancing got more raucous as they carried on throughout the afternoon to the time when the sun started to set. Owen disappeared to a room upstairs. It is said that she sobbed as she made her way up the stairs, as if she had realized that maybe this was a mistake. Suddenly a horn sounded from the gatehouse above the battlements. Henry walked out, and the sentry said to him, your wife's family have arrived. Henry ran up onto the ramparts, looked out, and there from the ocean came a large number of the Very Folk, making their way slowly out of the ocean, bearing garlands of flowers as they walked towards the castle. Henry now was in his cups. He was drunk thoroughly. I will not have these people here. My wedding is over. Who are you? Who are you? Be gone from here. They carried on walking to the castle. So Henry rushed downstairs, grabbed some of his closest men around him, got on their horses and rode out of Pennard Castle, down onto the beach of Three Cliffs. The wind was in his hair as he rushed forward, blade in hand. The Very Folk saw him coming, looked up but did not move. And he rode at them with all their might, their swords swinging, as if to slay them all right there. Just as they arrived and hit the group of people, they all vanished, one by one. And Henry and his men made circles in the sand as they rode round and round, swinging their swords at nothing. But from the top tower in the highest part of Pennard Castle, a wailing could be heard. And Henry saw his wife screaming and crying within the tower. He rode backwards, back up to the corner of the castle, rushed up the stone steps until he came to the bedchamber, pushed open the great wooden door. But the room was empty. Only on the bed was a single shell. As he picked it up, he outwardly laughed but inwardly cried as he knew he had made a terrible mistake. And at that moment, The wind started to whistle and whine through the room. The night fell. The waves grew bigger. The wind whistled. The rain started to fall. Then came the thunder, far away at first, but then like drums in the sky. And then came the lightning, so bright that it lit up the sky like it was day. Henry lay in his bed, feared as to what would happen. And suddenly the window blew open, and in came a storm of sand. A storm of sand that covered all his furniture. A storm of sand that covered everything he owned. He rushed from his bedroom and tried to make his way down the steps, but as he looked out the window over the courtyard, he could see that a tidal wave of sand had poured into the castle, covering it entirely. He rushed down to the courtyard, the sand up to his knees. He fought forward, the sand stinging his eyes. He got to the great gates, but was beaten back as the sand roared through the sky. It is said that he fell to the ground, and in the morning, in this great blanket of sand, all that could be seen was his arm raised above, as he was buried and dead beneath the tons and tons of sand. Everyone who came to the wedding and stayed that night did not survive. The castle was now a broken, sandy ruin. And no matter how many times the Normans cleared it, the next day the sand would return, burying it once more. Pennard Castle still stands on a beautiful outcrop overlooking Three Cliffs Bay. It is one of the most beautiful sights in all the Gower, and albeit the Gower, it's one of the most beautiful sights in all of Wales. But there stands the stone ruin of Pennard, that every night is drowned by the sand once more. No one can live there. Nobody has made it their home, for still the sand reclaims it every night. And that, my friends, is the strange tale of the Sands of Pennard Castle. Of the maid, no one knows where she went. But it is still said that if you stand in Three Cliffs and look out to sea, you sometimes see what looks to be a dolphin. But if you are patient enough and wait long enough, you will see a lone figure dancing in the water, looking up to the castle with a wry smile upon her face. Thank you ever so much for listening. Thank you for joining me at the time between times. Please like, subscribe and leave a comment. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Pas capus. Take care, all of you.